Hello there. On this week's edition of the program, we shall be focusing on the Lagos State Security Trust Fund. Lagos, being the commercial nerve center of Nigeria, is a city with its own peculiar security challenges. Residents and indeed foreigners in the state have over the years asked both the federal and the state governments to do all it can to ensure the safety of lives and property. Now, the Lagos state government, in its bid to take up the challenge to rid the state of crime, decided to establish by law the LSSTF, which was the first to be passed by the Lagos State House of Assembly in September of 2007 and then inaugurated in November of the same year, 2007. Since it came into existence, how has it been able to ensure that security agencies, especially the Lagos State Police Command, carry out its duties effectively in curbing crime? What are the benefits and perhaps challenges facing the fund? How much has been received of late? And is this an avenue for the board of the fund to interfere in the decisions made by security agencies in tackling crime? What roles does even the federal government have to play in all of this? Our guest is Mr. Fola ArthurWorrey, the Executive Secretary of the Lagos State Security Trust Fund, the LSSTF, as he lets us into the establishment's activities. I'm Ayotunde Balogun, and it's question time. Mr. Fola ArthurWorrey, you're welcome to Question Time.
Thank you very much.
Now, it's a great pleasure to have you with us this week, looking at the Lagos State Security Trust Fund, that's the LSSTF. Now, for an establishment such as this, inaugurated in 2007, let me find out from you, what led to the decision by the Lagos State government, to come up with this idea?
Well, I mean, it's common knowledge. And I think the testimony by the Inspector General of Police and the Chief of Naval Staff recently before the Senate indicates that underfunding has been a major problem of law enforcement and security in Nigeria. And this has probably gone on for about 2 decades, where consistently the budget doesn't reflect the reality. And not only that, the budget itself is short-funded. So it got to a stage where, although you have a police state command, you don't have a resourcing mechanism that, can address some of the issues. So the existence of a trust fund per se is an indication of a failure somewhere in the system. So, and today we have about 17. Indeed, I was at Cross River State's launch last week, and one by one, states are confronting the reality that although the responsibility for funding federal security agencies is an exclusively federal one, it has consistently, indeed serially, been unable to properly fund at the most basic things. The most basic things we talk about, when you say the police, you talk about the policeman and his kit, you talk about communications, and you talk about mobility. In these 3 sectors, the system has been grossly underfunded. So states, being the visible authority and working under the perception that a governor is a chief security officer, although that has neither constitutional nor statutory definition or function. But the people are not really interested in the constitutional niceties. So they just want a response. So the state having dialogued across sectors with various people and corporations, and having examined the matter through a commission headed by former Inspector General Musiliu Smith, decided, as did the federal government itself 2 years later, that funding lay at the heart of all the problems of law enforcement. There are other issues, there may be social issues, there may be economic, whatever, but the key thing is that you must have a minimum level of operational capacity if you are serious about law enforcement. So the state then, so the committee recommended to the governor that, listen, we need to bring in, to some degree, the private sector, not to transfer the responsibility, but to enable them participate. And then he agreed. He passed the law. The House passed the law, which was the first law that the governor signed in his administration. And then the fund was, the board of the fund was inaugurated, and we took it from there. And since then, year in, year out, there has been a measure of support that has enabled the state, working with the fund and the police, to at least design and develop a definable architecture so that you can then know where to intervene to keep the structure essentially in place, so that you can say that the Lagos State security architecture consists of this, that, and that. And then it's visible from the 767 emergency call to the cameras, to the commands, to the rapid response, to the special bike squad, marine, and so on and so forth. So that if you can then direct resources to deal with specific problems in a more flexible way than you would if you were waiting for the very unlikely possibility that Abuja even understands or interrogates what Lagos State's needs are regarding law enforcement.
So in other words, the state has taken it upon itself to go beyond.
It's even its constitutional calling. Yes, gone beyond, has certainly in the last, since the fund was established, has certainly, because how the fund operates is that the state makes its own contribution, not in cash. The fund does not receive subventions. So all its cash receipts come from the private sector. What the state does is contribute the assets it buys for the police, which in the past it would hand over to the police and then would almost lose sight of because there's no ownership. So the state gives to the fund what it intends for the police. So the fund then, first of all, expresses its ownership. These are ours. We will be responsible for their maintenance. We want to know where they are. We want to know how many. And then the fund transfers them to the agencies that will. And then the private sector contributes cash and donations of equipment, vehicles, etc. And the fund, based on a request, based on a defined, so we don't just say, oh yeah, here are 6 vehicles. No, you have to tell us what the need is. So when kidnapping became a major issue in Lagos, especially around VI, Ikoyi, etc., yes, the police set out a plan under the governor's urging, and then the fund can step in to say, okay, we can, therefore. So this is resource management and resource application to what I'll call targeted intervention.
Now, Mr. ArthurWorrey, how important is it for Lagos and indeed many other parts of the country to ensure that law enforcement agencies and indeed other security operatives are well funded? Is that the priority, or should that be the priority of the government and indeed the public, considering other sectors of the economy that also need urgent attention?
I think that the two most important components of the modern democratic state, right, are one, the capacity to protect lives and property, and two, the capacity to resolve disputes. So it's the police and the courts. Every military revolution in Nigeria didn't even try to interfere with those two component parts. You would think that if the military took over, it would then say, we don't need all these trappings. We say revolution, we do away with the police, but everybody knows that the modern state reflects itself most visibly in its law enforcement mechanisms, in its rule of law mechanisms. No investor will come if there is uncertainty. No business will grow if there is uncertainty of protection of lives and property. So I would think that a government